Hi, everybody. My name is Bernie Worrell.
My gift is from God, and I was born with perfect pitch also, so I can play anything I hear, I can play. And I had the gift of being able to mix music. This is what I do, been doing my whole life. Classically trained, played in church.
Bernie's the most significant keyboard player of our lifetime. Just the innovations that he had with music and where he stretched, where the instrument went to, his deep knowledge of the history of the different musics that he played. I mean, he was a kid going to conservatory, and there's pamphlets out there from concerto, recitals he played when he was like 4 or 5 years old.
Played for accompanying the opera vocalists in college during their lessons and their promotional concerts. Accompanied ballet and Spanish dance class in Boston. Played in nightclubs, R&B. Played with Jack Bruce, Ginger Baker, rock, Keith Richards. So I play music, and I've been mixing musics for forever.
Bernie, because I think out of everybody in the P-Funk camp, Bernie stayed the most relevant in contemporary times more than anybody else. Then all of a sudden, like, that Praxis album came out, that Transmutations with like right. Bootsy and Buckethead and Brain and the Africa Baby Bam from the Jungle Brothers, and then it was like, oh, Bernie's not just this dude who was doing cool stuff in the 70s. He's like doing stuff that's far out, like right now. And then that's when like all the Laswell productions were like, you go down to Tower Records every Saturday and there'd be some new Laswell production out that had Bernie on it. And like, yeah, all my money that was coming in was either going to music gear or something that Bernie played on.
The chance meeting that I had with Bernie, came up as a result of a Kickstarter campaign that he had launched, and he was trying to get a tour bus for the Bernie Worrell Orchestra, which he was kind of touring around with. And so I saw this, and it was like, for my birthday party. It was my 50th birthday, and I was pretty ambiguous about like wanting to. I don't know. My wife was like, "Well, you want to travel? Do you want to do this?" And then I saw this. I said, "That's what I want. I want Bernie Worrell to play, my 50th birthday party." So I talked to Judy, his then manager. That's his wife, who's widowed today. But she said, "Oh yeah, I understand you're interested in kicking in on this level. This would really help us secure the whole campaign. You have to meet your goal." And he goes, she's like, "By the way, what do you do?" And I said, "Are you a lawyer or something?" And I said, no, I'm a Native American, glass artist. I'm an artist. That's how I make my living. But I, have this passion for music, and I always have since I was a little kid. And I said, "Oh, by the way, I have a band, a Native American, I call it a Native American funk band, Little Big Band was the group at the time." And so she says, "Well, you know what, you should open up for Bernie. Well, let me check and see if we're, available." Said, "Oh yeah, we are available." So I thought this was like, an amazing opportunity to kind of connect with Bernie. And it did turn out that, he came over to my studio and I showed him all my work, and he, we just connected.
He mentioned his project and how he would like to merge. He didn't know if it was possible, but how he'd like to merge funk with Native American music. So I said, "Yes, what I thought." I said, "Sure." But I believe everything is related. Musics are related. Just have to work it out.
It's well known Bernie was, just considered himself a conduit for music and the things that just came through him, and his whole concept of the Wu concept, the Wizard of Wu, he was referred to as, and that's sort of like bringing people together through music, and that was and that, reflective in the name Khu.éex, because that's, it's calling people together. It's bringing people together. The birthday party night, I sang this traditional song, just as a welcoming, to all my, my party guests. And I said, and I just wanted to welcome Bernie to the stage. And so he took that melody that I was singing with my hand drum, and he started playing it, on the roads. He played it like a soul ballad, but he was kind of turning the melody, inside and out. And then he went to his, the organ, and it turned into this symphonic, crazy, classical piece, and the same thing, just a variation on the melody. And then he went to his synthesizers, and it started getting more psychedelic, and my jaw just was dropping, and I was like, wow, that's really cool. He came on to play the set, and he started with that thing, and after he went through this whole like 3 or 4 minute thing, then it's just like boom, downbeat, it breaks right into his music, and it was kind of like so cool. I mean, it was, and I think that's what planted the seed in my head. Like, okay, so if we take traditional melodies and kind of reinterpret them and put like, that was my jump off point. I thought that would be a really cool thing to do.
Khu.éex, Khu.éex, Stakat you on Khu.éex.
When Bernie came out to do the recording the very first time, I was so nervous about it. Like I pulled into the airport, and I drove up and parked on the second floor of the parking lot, up the ramp, and went to go pick up Bernie, and came back and went to look for the car and couldn't find the car. And I was looking and looking, and I was, I was having him drag his suitcases, up and down and through the elevators and all this stuff, and I just could not find the car. Just had like my head in my hands, like going, oh, what am I going to do here? And then all of a sudden, Bernie's like, rubbing my shoulders, like, hey man, it's okay. I'm like, whoa, Bernie Worrell's giving me a shoulder rub.
It was, instead of Bernie being like, I'm famous, get me to my motel, he was like giving Preston a back rub, like, hey, chill out, man, you're good.
So I finally said, Bernie, I'm just going to send you in a cab and send you to the hotel room. And you can be on your way. I'll find my car one way or the other. And so I did. And then finally, then I went to another security station, and I said, hey, look, if I, pulled into the airport and I drove up the ramp, try it right over there. So I go over to that elevator, and I take it down to the second floor. There's my car. And I'm like, God. He was, 70-year-old man, and he was like, so I'm then dragging him to this, rehearsal space over at Khu.éex, and we're like trying to run these tunes. And he's like diligently making notes, and like little notes for each song, and it's just like, no, wait, what was that? And you could just see he was just like, shake his head, but he was such a professional, and he was such a gentleman, and he just wanted to be there, and he had agreed to play with us. And of course, everything for him is probably in the key of music. Then we did play at the Nectar Lounge. Little big band played there, and it was a sold out night. I mean, there was like standing room only. Everybody was there to see Bernie. We'd build it as Little Big Band featuring Bernie Worrell, and we played that night, and we played. I felt like we played incredibly. I mean, it was such a charge to have him playing so expertly on everything. He had such a feel for fitting in and working around what was already there in terms of the way that we played the music. We tried to, give visual cues and nod like, okay, do a solo, and he would go off, and Khu.éex was like, says, no matter what, if Bernie's playing a solo, don't go to the change. Just keep going, just keep playing, keep vamping on that thing.
And he had, you hear about people that have perfect pitch where they can hear a note and know, like, all right, yeah, that's an A or that's a B. But he could do that in 6-part harmony. Like, I've never seen anybody that can do that. Like, I could play like an unusual chord voicing with 6 notes in it, wouldn't tell him what I was doing, and he would just hear it, and he'd go over to the keyboard and he would play it like voiced, all 6 notes voiced exactly the way I'd done it. It's like, okay, yeah, you don't really need to tell him the chord changes, because
right.
he can hear in like 6-part perfect pitch harmony and know like what's going on. Like, I've heard stories that he could hear like the wind blow and move leaves, and he could tell you what chord nature had just produced from the air moving combined with the air hitting different leaves.
So by December, I started working with Khu.éex, who, good friend of mine and saxophone player. He had worked with Bernie before, played with him a couple times and stuff. And so I said, I went to Khu.éex at that point, and I said, what would be the recipe for success to make a group and invite some musicians together to work with Bernie and try this out. And then Khu.éex said, well, Stanton Moore, so Stanton's the guy that he can do it. And
Stanton's like the drummer from Galactic, and
yeah,
plays with Khu.éex in Garage Etoile, and just master drummer, like New Orleans style, and just can get in and play anything.
Not only that, he was really well versed in like the sort of the Mardi Gras Indian kind of culture, and I thought, well, that would be an interesting influence, because that's he knows that style so well, and he can play jazz, he can play funk, he can he's just a great. So Khu.éex was really adamant about improvisational musicians, so he wanted to make sure that we had those kinds of people that could just kind of go on the fly and improvise. So it was me and Khu.éex and Bernie and Stanton, and then Jean Tagaban and Clarissa Rizol. They were the ones that were so, raised with the culture and had a huge amount of cultural knowledge.
My name is Clarissa Rizol. My role in this project, I think, is like as a consultant in the sense of some of the traditional songs, the traditional Tlingit Indian songs. And also I think he needed to have a female just because he wanted to have the energy of having a woman around, because there's all these guys. But also he, when he first asked me to do this, I said to him, what? No, what makes you think I can sing? And he's like, oh, I remember 12 years ago when we did that totem pole. We were sitting when we got done with the totem pole, we were all sitting around the fire, and you sang these couple of songs, man. You just blew everybody away. And I said, those were dirty songs. Those were dirty songs. So he says, so what? I want that energy, so, okay.
Clarissa and I, we've known each other a long time. We even before the band, and our relationship up in Alaska, just with the culture and the dance and storytelling. She was part of the same theater company that I was part of. In fact, she was one of the first members of the theater company, native theater company I was part of. And so Clarissa and I, our collaboration was not necessarily with the words, but just with the feel of a piece. We talk about, man, that sounds like just like the ocean, or man, that sounds just like being out there on the mountain, or canoes traveling over, the paddles going into the waters. Man, that's what that sounds like. So our collaboration was just kind of acknowledgement of what did this really sound like, what did this piece feel like, and and then she might throw something at me, and she'd ask me, hey, what do you think about this? I said, go for it, man. It sounds awesome. And it's vice versa too. I'd be like, hey, Clarissa, or she would just go, man, that was cool, and so, yeah. Sometimes, there are times we were on stage too, and I don't know what happens. I just kind of go crazy up there sometimes, and she would just say, I just had to get out of your way. I didn't want to get hurt.
That's Gene's brilliance. He can sometimes just pull the right story into a musical thing that we've done, and he just kind of launches right into it. And he's got such a theatrical approach to the way that he does storytelling that it just fit.
In my piece and the work that I do with the band, it's not only with the songs or the words or the spoken words themselves. Sure, just there's many times going, oh, this sucks. I don't want to do this. This just doesn't fit. And then seeing what works and putting it in there. But also, not only that, but a lot of my parts too is creating these ambient sounds, with bringing the ocean drum into things, or flute sounds, or whistles, or there's times I brought the big thunder drum into there as well, and these things too.
As like the sounds that you were talking about, I don't know if it's necessarily intentional. It's just, we have this wide span of sounds available that we can utilize, from traditional instruments to traditional vocal styles, from, the language to throat singing to, to the hoo-ha to, and then part of it, Randall is definitely a genius in the studio on getting sounds out of instruments that aren't the usual ones that you would expect. It's like we would have Gene record a flute part and then flip it so the sound file's in reverse. So there's flute being played in reverse at some part, like guitars going through harmonizers and all kind of stuff.
The same power that flowed through 10,000 generations flows through your veins, young one, old one, middle-aged one, all of you. I'm proud of you. Proud of you because you made it to today. Because you're strong enough to listen. You're strong enough to hear. Strong enough to be here. Proud of you. You're so intelligent. You're amazing beyond belief. If no one has told you today, you are precious. You are valuable and you are needed. We need you.
And I think it's important to point out Randall Dunn's participation in this creative process as well, because he always had the idea of like, a different sound. Like he would say, okay, Bernie, hey, how about organ on this one, or how about Rhodes on this, or whatever it was going to be, and then he would or like a Moog line, a solo or whatever it was going to be. So he was also a big part of that layering, and I think that we had so many layers. We had the ability to pick and choose like the different things to highlight.
He's doing the production and engineering at the beginning stage. It definitely has a different quality to it. In a lot of ways, he kind of has a cinematic, I guess, element to the way he sculpts sound and kind of guides people through the creative process, which I think has kind of fostered where a lot of our albums have like a cinematic element to them, where it kind of feels like an analogy to being like a director and a cinematographer, whereas like the musicians are kind of the actors and the screenwriters, I guess. But yeah, I think the more we go into it, the more I think we've looked at it like, yeah, these are like movies in sound.
Just reminded me of something that Clarissa and I talked about a lot, was the skill of imaging, imaging things in your mind, where the stories that we used to tell were often just words, spoken words, and then each individual would have a way of painting a picture in their head about the story, and that process or that skill is actually being largely lost, because we're looking to little screens, to show us things, or movies to guide us through the visual nature of the storytelling. That we don't really have that kind of rich imaging skill in our brains anymore.
We used to do that. We used to perform with the music. You'd have the visual, and then you'd have the music and all of that, and the dance. It's just that it's the same thing, really, except it's just slightly different. It's just slightly different beat, different instruments, additional instruments is what it is here. And these guys are having a great time, and I think it's really important to have that cross-cultural exchange, because these guys get to be exposed to a little bit of, the Northwest Coast style drum and music and way of dance and being, and we get to be exposed to incorporating, a different sound, a different, additional beats and all this other stuff. And I think it's inspiring. You cannot help but be inspiring to all the, the next generations of kids and human beings, no matter what culture they come from.
Clarissa is as significant to her mediums as possibly more as Bernie is to his, because with Clarissa, and I'm sure you can fill in more than I can.
The weaving style, the chill cat weaving style. It's something that's really, it's a lot of time. I mean, there's so many techniques. It's a hand weaving, but it's so tight in it's wool, it's cedar bark, but the patterning that you make with it is really a very special technique, and not many people can do it really well. And so she just picked it up so quickly, but that she was able to essentially kind of preserve it and also share it with other people. So she was a teacher. To me, she was kind of like a shaman in a lot of ways, because she had like visions and things, and we would have long conversations. And I learned a lot about, the community up in Alaska and the Tlingit community and the people and, different figures. And I didn't really, so I didn't grow up there, but I did learn about some of these people through her. So she was like a big sister to me, and a mentor, from the art, the visual art, and the insights that she had about the art and the meanings behind it and the reasons for making them. The symbol, the symbolic gestures of making something and having it, presenting it at a Khu.éex, at a potlatch ceremony. There's so much to know about it, and she was really intuitive about all of it. So, and we have hour-long, 2-hour phone conversations, and they would just they would be floating every which direction, and just and it was fascinating.
But there's so many parallels between Bernie and Clarissa, though. That's something that I'm still, catching as, I had a limited amount of time getting to know Clarissa, so I'm still learning stuff about her. But just as people, their spiritual connections, the generation that they were from, what they did with the mediums that they worked in, even up to, how close in time they passed. They both passed from cancer
the same year. Yeah.
And it's like the two of them still, I think we approach it, just this project is, whatever we do, is this something that Bernie would be cool with? Is this something that Clarissa would be cool with? Would they have advice for us on what we're doing with this or with that? But, and it's like Bernie's, a male personification of that. Clarissa's a female personification of that. There's just so many parallels. And I think that's one thing that, I wish more people when they, were talking about the group, that, Bernie's much more famous and well known, like all over the world, but, Clarissa was as important.
She felt like this was an awakening and a new way of presenting a traditional song, and that the power behind it, what she was feeling was something that was awakening the wilderness within.
I like Preston. We got along real good, and we grew tight. And I guess my role is to try to bring things together, and what I play, how I play it, be part of the cohesive team. Put some ingredients, some of this, some of that in the stew, and so we have a good meal.